Hey guys, tonight we slip into warm water, fog mirrors, and a porcelain basin that witnessed the rise and fall of an empire. That's right, tonight we're sinking into Napoleon Bonaparte's bathtub routine. You're not storming any castles. You're not reciting battle stats. You're reclining into a stream of soapy, mildly absurd history. One foot in bubbles, the other in Europe's most ambitious hygiene schedule. Picture this: steam curls around your face as candlelight flickers against ancient stone walls. Outside, the Corsican wind rattles the shutters. Inside, a child with a mess of dark curls grumbles about the water being too cold, again. This child, small for his age and already unreasonably dramatic, is Napoleon. Yes, that Napoleon. And tonight, he wants goat milk in his bath, because someone told him Caesar did it. You probably won't survive this, if you try to make historical sense of every moment. This story isn't about the battles, but the baths. The towel folds. The arguments about water temperature. The soft squeak of empire-scented soap. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge up a rocky path in 1760s Corsica, brushing past a stubborn goat who refuses to share the road. The stone houses lean against each other like tired old friends. This little island, still tugging between French and Italian influences, is where young Napoleon Bonaparte is born, the second of 8 children in a loud, prideful household where space is tight and egos tighter. The Bonapartes aren't rich, but they're determined. And in Corsica, determination smells faintly of sheep wool, damp stone, and the strange herbal stew Mama Bonaparte simmers with a vengeance. You, in your humble bedroom, hear yelling downstairs, probably about politics again, but what catches your nose is something stronger, the aroma of herbs steeped in boiling water. That's because Mama is preparing the bath. Not just any bath. A family tradition involving rosemary, lavender, olive oil, and, if rumors are true, goat milk. They say it softens the skin, soothes the spirit, and repels lice. You step into the large copper tub, its edges slick and too hot at first touch. Your mother, stern and efficient, ladles warm water over your shoulders, muttering prayers and instructions all at once. You squirm. The water's never quite right. Too much steam. The herbs are poking you. Why is it always rosemary? And why do you have to share this tub with your younger brother, who keeps kicking? Even as a child, Napoleon insists on certain rules: no floating leaves, hotter water, fewer interruptions. He loathes disorder, even in a bath. Historians still argue whether his fastidiousness came from Corsican traditions or sheer personal fussiness. Either way, bath time becomes your first command post. You recite imaginary speeches to the water. You imagine your toy soldiers waging war across the soap scum. You start thinking, really thinking, about how to organize people, not unlike organizing bath time. No joke, you assign your siblings roles in the bathing process. Someone scrubs. Someone refills. Someone is banished for splashing. One fringe tidbit. Your nanny once claimed you tried to arrest a rubber duck substitute, really just a cork float, for seditious behavior. That may or may not be exaggerated, but your obsession with control even in early years was, well, bubbly. Baths are rare luxuries in many Corsican homes, but the Bonapartes pride themselves on maintaining decorum, and that includes staying clean. You're taught that bathing is both physical and moral. The body must be clean, your mother says, for the soul to be sharp. Or maybe she said, to avoid fleas, depending on the day. Your first memories of command are here, surrounded by steam and the scent of aging copper. And it's here, with a soft sponge in your hand and resentment in your heart, that you begin forming the habits you'll carry to Paris, to Egypt, to the palaces of Europe, and even to your lonely final island. Corsica, for all its beauty, is rough around the edges. Water is fetched by hand, heated by firewood, and shared. Every bath is a minor production, and you hate sharing. Soon, your sneaking extra turns in the tub when no one's looking, locking the door with improvised wedges and pretending you're in a tactical meeting. It becomes clear to everyone that your time in the bath is sacred. Sacred, and longer than necessary. At night, you wrap yourself in the scratchy, sun-dried towels and dream not of war, but of hot water on demand. One uncle scoffs, he'll conquer a continent just to have a warm bath. A joke, maybe. But not far off. The connection between control and comfort settles deep in your bones. You associate command with calm. Hygiene with clarity. A clean body with a sharp mind. And when your tutors reprimand you for obsessing over the position of your hairline in the mirror, you argue, very seriously, that appearance is strategy. At 9, you leave Corsica for the French mainland, to study at military school. The baths there are communal, cold, and rushed. You hate them. You start to write home, not about homesickness, but about the soap. Please send proper soap, you write. The soap here is chalk. Your mother laughs. Your classmates don't. One roommate later tells a biographer that you argued passionately with a school janitor about the pH of the water. Another said you once skipped a fencing lesson just to scrub a copper basin. Whether these are true or just whispered embellishments, one thing's certain, you are remembered for your fastidiousness. And so, your bathtub journey begins not with riches or royalty, but with a goat milk soak and a tantrum over floating herbs. What follows is an empire of warm water, bath oils, and the steamy corners of history most people never bother to explore. But you're soaking it all in. You wake before dawn, the scratchy cot beneath you barely warmed by the threadbare blanket. Outside, it's not yet morning, but the bugle call already slices through the dim mist. You're 16 now, small for your age but fierce in your ambition. And very much not thrilled about communal hygiene. Military school isn't what you hoped. The food is mush, the uniforms are itchy, and the baths, well, let's talk about the baths. There's no goat milk here. No herbs. Just rows of zinc tubs lined up like defeated soldiers in a stone-walled washroom that always smells like damp wool and discipline. You're expected to take your weekly bath, yes, weekly, alongside boys who think soap is optional and modesty is for aristocrats. One of them brushes his teeth with ash and says it's more natural. You don't speak to him again. You trudge into the room, wrap your towel tighter around your shoulders, and scan the tubs. They're lukewarm at best, and someone has already used the bar of soap you brought from Corsica. The betrayal. You scrub quickly, purposefully, pretending you're inspecting a battlefield rather than your own underarms. This is where the pattern cements. When life is chaotic, you cling harder to cleanliness. It's not just a bath. It's the only part of the day where you have even an ounce of control. You start bathing more than others. They laugh at you. They call you names. You call them uncultured. One night, after lights out, you sneak into the bathing chamber with a candle stub, a ragged towel, and a tin cup of water warmed over a contraband flame. You wash in sections, arms, then face, then feet, methodically, like drawing up battle plans. Your roommate groans. Napoleon, he mumbles, you've lost your mind. Maybe. But at least you're clean. Historians still argue whether this early obsession came from genuine comfort in the ritual or a need to mask insecurity. Corsican in France, poor among the privileged, short in stature but towering in will, perhaps a spotless collar helped you feel tall. You graduate and enter the army. And here's the thing about 18th century warfare, it's not non-stop glory. It's a whole lot of sitting in mud. Literally. Weeks of marching, followed by weeks of waiting, troops camped in trenches, officers huddled under canvas tents, and everyone reeking of unwashed ambition. You're posted to Auxonne first, then Valence. The towns blur together. What doesn't? The filth. You step out of your tent and your boots sink into the muck. Soldiers relieve themselves too close to camp. Someone boils cabbage, and the smell makes your eyes water. There are lice, fleas, and something that might be a rat chewing your sleeve. But you, Napoleon, refuse to surrender to the grime. Your tent becomes a sanctuary. You bribe locals for buckets of water. You heat them over a fire, pour them into a tin basin, and bathe even if you have to do it in shifts, upper body one day, legs the next. You instruct your valet, eventually you get one, to keep your towel dry at all costs. He thinks you're kidding. You are not. There's a story, possibly true, possibly embellished, of you pausing a field drill to scold a junior officer for wiping his muddy hands on his coat. If you command men, you reportedly said, start by commanding your own sleeves. One quirky tidbit. You attempt, during one campaign, to create a mobile bathing cart. It's essentially a barrel strapped to a mule, lined with waxed cloth, intended to serve as a makeshift soaking station. It tips over within an hour. The mule escapes. You blame your engineer. Later, in a letter to your brother, you describe bathing as the only moment of the day when a man may truly reflect. You conveniently ignore the fact that the rest of your day is mostly plotting grand strategies. By now, the ritual's deeper than skin. Baths are where you recharge, rehearse speeches, scheme. In cold camps, the steam from your basin is a minor miracle. When water freezes, you instruct aides to chip ice and warm it under fire. They grumble. You promote the fastest one. Your colleagues think you're eccentric. Your superiors are divided, some admire the discipline, others find it precious. One general mocks your overheated bath fetish during a dinner. 3 months later, he's reassigned. Coincidence? Who knows? Meanwhile, you're rising through the ranks. You earn praise for your intellect, strategy, and, amusingly enough, your remarkable polish. You're 24 when you're promoted to brigadier general. Your troops cheer. You thank them, and then immediately ask where the nearest bathhouse is. You find it in a dusty village on the Italian border. It's barely functional, the copper tub dented and the water murky. Still, you step in, sigh, and lean back. The empire isn't yours yet, but in this moment, with warm water covering your sore limbs, you feel invincible. From mud to marble, from cramped school tubs to makeshift basins in fields, the pattern holds. You insist on cleanliness like others insist on coffee or cigars. Some officers meditate. You lather. One campaign finds you in northern Italy. Rain pours for days. Roads are rivers. The men complain. You press on, soaked, cold, determined. At camp, someone offers you dry clothes first. You say, bring water. That night, they watch as you steam yourself clean in a tent barely holding together. Your soldiers begin calling your camp setup the General Spa. It's half joke, half awe. Because here's the funny part, your obsession starts to catch on. Other officers copy you. They start bringing extra socks, sharpening razors, even washing more frequently. Discipline improves. Morale lifts. Historians still argue whether your clean habits actually impacted military outcomes. Some say it made you more focused, less distracted by discomfort. Others scoff. One said, Napoleon might have won battles because he smelled better than anyone else in the tent. Regardless, you keep scrubbing. And dreaming. Because every time your fingers wrinkle from long soaks, every time your soap squeaks against skin, it reminds you, there's more than mud in your future. There's marble. There's Paris. There's a bathtub that won't need to be hauled by mule. Eventually, you'll have one built just for you. But not yet. Tonight, you dry off with a ragged towel, smooth down your hair, and draft military memos beside a flickering candle. Your feet are cold, your basin's already cooling, but you've had your bath. And with that, you're ready for empire. You step off the coach into the cobbled chaos of Paris, boots polished, uniform pressed, and the city's sour sweet scent slapping you across the face like an uninvited critique. Paris in the late 1790s is equal parts glamour and grime. One alley is perfumed with fresh bread, the next with something vaguely rotting and alarmingly sticky. But you're not here for pastries or politics. You're here for progress. And, let's be honest, you're hoping for better plumbing. Now a general with a growing reputation, you take up lodging in a modest townhouse. It has furniture that wobbles, walls that leak when it rains, and, miraculously, a copper tub deep enough to soak in without having to bend your knees like a paper crane. The first night, you instruct the housemaid to heat water. Not just any water. Hot enough to cook a chicken, you say. She stares at you like you've sprouted a second head. You remind her you're Corsican. We do things with feeling, you explain. She doesn't get the joke. You slip into the tub that evening with a sigh that echoes down the hallway. The water scalds slightly, perfect. Steam curls into the ceiling cracks. The chaos of the day melts off your skin, replaced by clarity and calm. You splash once, gently. For the first time since leaving the muddy campaign trails, you feel human again. It becomes a routine. A ritual. You begin every day with a brisk rinse and end every night with a long soak. The staff learns quickly, don't knock, don't interrupt, and for heaven's sake, don't touch the soap. One mainstream historical fact. You're rising fast in Parisian society, thanks to your military victories and strategic alliances. You win the Italian campaign. You're named commander of the Army of the Interior. You become the darling of the revolution's next phase, with the directory reluctantly impressed by your efficiency. But behind every speech and saber rattle, there's a tub quietly cooling in your room. The tub itself becomes a talking point. Friends and enemies alike whisper about your strange insistence on hygiene. He bathes every day, someone murmurs at a dinner party, eyes wide with suspicion, as if you also sleep upside down or drink candle wax. One fringe tidbit. According to a palace servant's later account, you once stopped mid-sentence during a planning meeting just to ask, "Did someone use my soap?" No one confessed. You assigned 2 men to guard your quarters that night. Your baths become longer. You begin to read while soaking, military treatises, classical history, and the occasional steamy novel you swear is for tactical understanding of social behavior. You even start drafting letters from the tub. Pen in one hand, sponge in the other. Your valet learns to set a writing board across the tub. He balances it precariously on the edges while you scribble orders and notes. Sometimes ink smudges. Sometimes the board sinks. Once, you blame a miscommunication with the British Navy on an unfortunate splash incident. No one laughs. You weren't joking. Historians still argue whether this period of your life marks the true shift from soldier to statesman. Some say the battlefield hardened you. Others claim it was Paris, and the luxury of warm water, that softened your edges just enough to plan with cold precision. You certainly start seeing things more clearly. Strategically. Like a man who finally has good lighting in the bathroom. And then comes Josephine. Ah yes. Enter stage left, the dazzling, aloof, and vaguely perfumed Josephine de Beauharnais. She smells like jasmine and danger. You're smitten. You write her letter after letter, desperate and dripping with affection, many of which, awkwardly, are composed from the bath. Some historians believe you even added steam-pressed seals to a few of them. Possibly by accident. Possibly not. Josephine, it turns out, is also fond of long baths. But hers are perfumed, luxurious, and social. Yours are methodical, disciplined, and quiet. She invites friends into her boudoir to chat while she soaks. You consider this blasphemy. Bath time, you declare, is not diplomacy. Still, you make compromises. You allow her to keep rose oils and vanilla tinctures in the bathroom, but you draw the line at floating petals. I don't want to smell like dessert, you grumble. She laughs. You don't. Yet even as your domestic life takes on the scent of romance and occasional mildew, your political life soars. You become first consul. Then consul for life. And then, of course, emperor. With each promotion comes a better residence. And with each residence, a better bath. Deeper tubs. Better heating. Smoother soap. By the time you're comfortably seated in the Tuileries Palace, your bathroom is no longer just a room, it's a sanctuary. You design it yourself. Or rather, you instruct people with very impressive hats to do so. It includes a marble tub with gilded lion's feet, hidden plumbing powered by an elaborate system of copper pipes, and a thick velvet robe draped permanently by the door. Rumor has it you once had a minor argument with your interior designer over the exact height of the faucet. The bath becomes more than a habit, it's your second office. You meet with aides there, discuss campaigns, listen to reports. Ministers squirm in chairs while you lounge in scented steam, occasionally grunting in response. Some find it inspiring. Others find it deeply uncomfortable. One diplomat later wrote, he looked like a Roman god, if Roman gods had really strong opinions about towel texture. Eventually, the line between private and public blurs. The tub isn't just where you reflect, it's where you rule. And yet, for all your titles, you remain, at your core, a boy from Corsica who wanted just one undisturbed soak. One quiet moment. One perfect temperature, achieved without argument. That evening, as you lean back against porcelain warmed by gold-veined water, the city hums beyond the window. The empire glitters. Josephine laughs down the hall. And you? You add just a little more soap. Your empire smells faintly of lavender, lye, and wet parchment. It's 1804. Your emperor now, crowned not by the Pope but by your own confident hands. The world watches, stunned, as you hoist that ridiculous gold wreath onto your head like you've been doing it in the mirror for years. Which, to be fair, you kind of have. But while the coronation robes are heavy and the crown is tighter than expected, you suspect someone measured with malice. The real comfort lies waiting back in your private apartments, a bath drawn to imperial specifications, of course. The temperature is checked 3 times. The soap is carved with the imperial eagle. And you have your own attendant whose job, no joke, is to ensure your towels remain perfectly warm between folds. This is peak Napoleon. And this is peak bathtub. You don't just bathe. You command your bath. You preside over it. You treat it with the same precision you used to cross the Alps. Every evening, like clockwork, you retire to your chambers and soak while reading state documents. You hum. You dream. You plot. One mainstream historical fact. The Napoleonic Code is now being drafted, a sweeping legal reform that will shape Europe for generations. You're intimately involved in the details, some say obsessively so. And more than one clause is reviewed by candlelight, while you're up to your chest in eucalyptus-scented water. France may owe civil law to a very well-moisturized monarch. Here's a curious little fringe tidbit. According to a valet's journal, during long sessions in the tub, you sometimes had officials read battle reports aloud while you gently splashed the surface like a bored otter. Read it again, you'd say. Slower. Always slower. The aide once described the experience as public service in a sauna. The baths grow longer. Sometimes 2 hours. You start referring to time in terms of soak cycles. I'll review it in 1 bath's time, you announce to an aide. He blinks, confused. You wave him away with a sudsy hand. Your obsession is more than comfort now, it's your rhythm, your control mechanism, your sanctuary. But there's always a complication. And in this case, her name is Josephine. Josephine, for all her charm and grace, does not share your need for control. She is impulsive, late to appointments, and entirely indifferent to the perfectly folded towel hierarchy you've developed. She soaks, yes, but she drifts. She uses floral oils that linger in your tub's porcelain, and you hate it. It smells like a bakery in here, you grumble one evening, stepping into the remnants of her rose petal soap. She giggles. You consider divorce. Historians still argue whether your growing irritability toward Josephine had more to do with politics or perfume. The truth is probably both. You needed an heir. She couldn't provide one. But also, her bathing habits were chaotic. She once tried to introduce floating candles. Floating candles. You nearly slipped. So you separate. Politely. With ceremony. And then, privately, you exhale, finally free to reclaim your bath. Without Josephine, your habits become even more precise. You begin traveling with a portable bathtub, a marvel of collapsible wood and lined canvas, designed to be assembled in any location, under any circumstances. You take it to Prussia, to Austria, even to the wind-blown plains of Poland. One contemporary account claims you once paused an entire campaign to wait for your tub to arrive by wagon. Your generals rolled their eyes. You reminded them that a clean commander is a sharp commander. They grumbled, but no one argued. You even attempt to impose bathing standards across your ranks. Officers are instructed to maintain hygiene, and you launch a brief campaign promoting cleanliness in the barracks. Posters are printed. Soap rations are increased. Some soldiers cheer. Others, used to peasant grit and wartime filth, are less thrilled. Still, it catches on. The phrase, "bathe like Bonaparte," circulates briefly among troops, half mocking, half sincere. You hear it once in a village square and pretend not to smile. Here's where things get weirder. You begin documenting your baths. Not publicly, of course. But in a private journal, a slim, leather-bound book hidden among war reports, you begin to note water temperatures, bath durations, preferred oils, and thoughts that come to you mid-soak. It's part diary, part engineering log, part manifesto. One entry reads: warmth loosens the mind. A cool soak restores discipline. Must investigate a method for alternating temperatures mid-bath. You never do invent that dual-temp tub. But you try. You sketch designs. One includes a bellows and 3 valves. It leaks immediately. Your valet resigns that evening. And yet, despite all your power, all your titles, all your reformations and victories, the bathtub is where you remain most human. Here, you don't wear a uniform. You don't bark orders. You just think. Sometimes, you close your eyes and imagine Corsica. The sea. The smell of olive trees. The first time you saw a soap bar that didn't smell like goat. The boy in the military school who teased you. The sting of that first icy rinse in the barracks. Your fingers wrinkle. The candles burn low. And it's in these moments, with the steam curling around your thoughts, that you make some of your most consequential decisions. Wars begin in meetings, yes, but strategies are finalized in foam. One late evening, as you soak beneath the frescoed ceiling of your private palace bathroom, you murmur to yourself, "They think I'm strange for this. Let them." Because strange is not the same as wrong. You ring for your aide. "More hot water," you say. "And bring the latest draft of the naval orders." He hesitates. "You wish to review them now, sire." You raise an eyebrow. "Does a fleet not deserve a clean command?" He nods, disappears. You lean back, water sloshing gently, letters floating nearby, candlelight dancing across your furrowed brow. Outside, France holds its breath. Inside, you exhale. In a kingdom of chaos, you rule from a tub. The bathwater sloshes softly as the road beneath you jolts, one wooden wheel at a time. You're not in a palace now. You're in a field tent somewhere between Ulm and Austerlitz, listening to cannon fire in the distance and trying to convince your aides that yes, even here, even now, a proper bath matters. This is war, sure, but war doesn't mean filth. At least not for you. Let the rest of the army reek of sweat, blood, and gunpowder. You, Emperor Napoleon, still start your day with hot water and end it surrounded by steam, no matter how muddy the battlefield or how cold the morning frost. One mainstream historical fact: you win the Battle of Austerlitz in 1805, a tactical masterpiece. You decimate the combined Russian and Austrian forces, outmaneuvering and outthinking them with style. Military historians call it your finest hour. But here's the part they don't usually include in the textbooks: you celebrated the victory with a portable bath and a chunk of vanilla soap wrapped in cloth, humming as your servants lugged buckets of boiling water across the frozen camp. This is what the empire runs on now: logistics, willpower, and a surprisingly aggressive soap budget. There's a story, fringe, sure, but tantalizing, that you once had a tent specially built to house your tub alone. Not for sleeping. Not for eating. Just for bathing. It had canvas walls, collapsible wood floors, and one poor servant whose job was literally to mind the warmth. He quit after 2 weeks, citing psychological fatigue. And so your campaigns continued, fueled by caffeine, cannonballs, and regular exfoliation. You start calling it your thinking water. You insist that no final military plan is sealed until it's been reviewed mid-soak. Your generals, increasingly accustomed to the routine, begin scheduling reports by bath schedule. "We'll approach him after his rinse," they whisper. Sometimes you summon men directly to the bath tent. An officer might deliver a report, breath fogging the chilled morning air, while you lounge submerged, only your head and knees above water. "Speak louder," you'd say. The steam absorbs cowardice. Historians still argue whether these bath briefings improved or impaired your strategic planning. Some believe the relaxation helped you visualize terrain and logistics better. Others claim it made your staff deeply uncomfortable and prone to agreeing just to get out faster. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in the soapy middle. And let's talk about Moscow. You launch your grand campaign into Russia, a move so bold, so risky, so drenched in hubris that your bathtubs can barely keep up. You pack several of them. One for each major waypoint. They are transported carefully, along with an entourage of towel carriers, soap inventory specialists, and your now famous bath manager, Baptiste. Poor Baptiste. He once rode for 3 days straight just to retrieve the lost plug to your favorite enamel basin. When you enter Moscow, the city is eerily empty, the fires still smoldering. Most of the furniture has been looted or burned. But in a half-destroyed mansion, with soot-streaked walls and shattered windows, you find what you're looking for: a copper tub, still intact. You have it scrubbed, polished, and filled. Outside, the city is a ruin. Inside, you're floating in silence, the flicker of candles reflected on water, trying to puzzle out your next move. You soak until the water cools. Then longer still. One of your aides later writes, "He sat there, surrounded by ash and marble, as if the war had never touched him." You'd argue the opposite. It touched you everywhere. That's why the bath was necessary. A fringe tale from this time involves a near-death moment. A soldier allegedly attempts to sneak into the mansion to assassinate you, only to be so thrown by the image of the emperor in a half-lit bath that he freezes. You calmly request a towel. The man is captured before he can recover from the surrealism of it all. That story probably isn't true. But you like to think it could have been. As the Russian winter sets in and your men begin their grim retreat, the bath becomes harder to justify. Water freezes before it can boil. Fuel is scarce. Soap becomes a luxury item. Baptiste, frostbitten and grim-faced, begs you to just sponge off, sire. You refuse. You command one last bath outside Smolensk. It's barely warm. The wind howls. Snow flutters into the water, turning it slushy. You sit in it anyway, teeth chattering, because this ritual is what keeps you centered. The enemy may chase you, your army may crumble, but you. You are still the man who bathes. Eventually, you relent. You dry off, don your coat, and face the long, frozen march. Back in Paris, months later, your first act is not a parade. It's not a speech. It's not even visiting your generals. It's a 4-hour bath. With eucalyptus. And lemon soap. And heated floors. You sit in silence for so long, Baptiste thinks you've drowned. You haven't. You're just imagining each failed maneuver melting away, each loss rinsed off like battlefield grime. Historians still argue whether this obsession with cleanliness was a symptom of anxiety, vanity, or strategy. Maybe it was all three. But one thing is certain, no other general in history kept a tub closer than you. Even now, as whispers of defeat begin to build, as cracks appear in your empire's golden facade, you cling to this one constant. Not your armies. Not your throne. But the bath. Because in water, you think clearly. In water, you remember who you are. And you are not done yet. The mirror fogs slowly as steam billows upward. You draw a lazy circle on the glass, revealing your own tired reflection, darker under the eyes now, with lines around the mouth that weren't there during Austerlitz. Still, you're here. Still, the water runs hot. It's 1813, and the empire is cracking like an old porcelain basin. Defeat stings. Not just because you're losing battles, though you are, but because the losses feel messy. Improvised. Unworthy. And worse still, your bath routine has become erratic. You no longer have the luxury of timing every soak to perfection. Some days you miss it entirely. The tubs are packed up hastily, your personal linen forgotten in a rush. One night, you're forced to use an unfamiliar soap. Almond. You feel betrayed. A mainstream historical fact here, the Sixth Coalition, Britain, Austria, Prussia, Russia, Sweden, Spain, and Portugal, has formed against you. It's everyone, basically. Even countries that dislike each other more than they dislike you are teaming up like the end credits of a revenge movie. And now you're in Leipzig, commanding what's left of your magic. It's October, and what unfolds will become known as the Battle of Nations. 4 days of violence. Thousands dead. The smell of gunpowder clings to your coat even in sleep. You manage to sneak in 2 baths that week. Cold ones. There's no time to wait for firewood. You grit your teeth, lower yourself in, and tell yourself this discomfort is spiritual. Cleansing. You are shedding weakness, maybe even pride. Your aides don't buy it. One whispers, he's unraveling. But they don't say it to your face. Not yet. You find yourself reminiscing more during soaks. Not of glory, but of oddities. Like the time a rogue parrot in Vienna interrupted your strategy meeting by yelling, "Vive l'Empereur." Or how, for 2 months in 1808, you insisted on lavender oil imported only from a specific monastery in Provence. You were obsessed with the scent, claiming it sharpened your memory. Baptiste still has the receipts. They're absurd. And then there's your son. The King of Rome. You had him with your second wife, Marie-Louise of Austria. An alliance marriage. Tactical. She bathed, of course, though never with your fervor. But she understood your quirks better than Josephine ever did. Once, she gifted you a hand-carved soap tray shaped like the Arc de Triomphe. You cried. Quietly. Into a towel. Historians still argue whether your deepening obsession with private rituals, like bathing, was a coping mechanism for your unraveling grip on power. The debate often splits along personality lines. Those who admire you say it was your way of remaining composed under pressure. Those who don't say you were hiding. Both might be right. The truth is, the bathtub is the last place where no one interrupts you. Not even the truth. By early 1814, the coalition has marched into France. You retreat to Fontainebleau, stripped of your command, your allies abandoning you like soap slipping from a wet palm. It's here, in that grand chateau, that you take one of your most famous baths, though no one talks about it. You order it drawn at midnight. The fire roars, the marble floor gleams, and you sit for hours, alone. Thinking. Plotting. Not victory, not return, but goodbye. Because tomorrow, you'll abdicate. You've already signed the papers once. Tomorrow will make it official. There's a fringe account, written by a footman decades later, that claims you cried in that tub. He let the water hide his face, the servant wrote. But I heard it. The little gasps. The soft sobbing of a man who had no more world to hold. Maybe it's true. Maybe not. But that night, when you step out of the bath and stand dripping in front of the fire, even Baptiste says nothing. He simply hands you the towel, bowed. You leave the next morning for exile. Elba. Ah yes, Elba, the island of mild disappointment. It's beautiful, sure. The sea is clean, the sunset's theatrical. But you feel clipped. A bird in a gilded cage. You're given a house, a title, and surprisingly decent plumbing. They think it will placate you. They forget who they're dealing with. Within a week, you've organized a functioning bureaucracy. Within a month, you've upgraded your personal bath to include a copper pipe system that pulls water directly from a heated cistern. You hire locals to chop eucalyptus and mint for oils. You begin bathing again with purpose. At night, you lie in your tub and stare at the ceiling. You're not done. Not yet. You feel it deep in your bones, bones that ache less when warm. One mainstream historian once called Elba your spa sabbatical. And in a way, it was. You trimmed weight, studied newspapers, and sharpened your mind. But you also spent long hours in bathwater, floating, dreaming, planning. There's a delightful little fringe tale that says you had a spy network hidden inside your bathhouse staff. That local servants would hand you coded messages on soap wrappers, which you'd read and dissolve. Clever, if implausible. But it sounds like you, doesn't it? And then you return. In 1815, you escape Elba and land on the French coast with a small force. You march inland. The troops sent to capture you. They join you instead. You're back. Bath and all. You resume your rituals like you never left. Towels folded. Water just below scalding. Reports read aloud over the splash of your feet. France trembles, half in fear, half in awe. Your comeback is the stuff of legend. Historians still argue whether the 100 Days, your brief return, was born from genuine ambition or just a refusal to go gently into irrelevance. But you were always going to return. A man who spends that much time naked with maps doesn't just vanish. And so you head to your final act. Waterloo looms. Your bathwater sloshes. The empire hangs by a soap thread. But for now, in this quiet, candlelit hour, you float. You exhale. The marble walls reflect your steady breathing. Because even as the world readies to end your story, you're still writing it, from the tub. You wake up to rain. Not a mist, not a drizzle, rain. Heavy, moody, soaked to your soul rain. You pull aside the tent flap and step out into a world of gray. The ground squelches under your boots, and everything smells like wet wool and damp horses. It's June 18, 1815. The day of Waterloo. You know it already. Not because someone told you, but because the air has that peculiar stillness before everything collapses. And also because Baptiste nearly cried when the makeshift bath tent flooded during the night. The stove's gone out. The towels are wet. The soap is somewhere downstream. This is not how you like to start a battle day. One mainstream historical fact, the Battle of Waterloo becomes the defining end to your reign. It pits you against the Duke of Wellington and a coalition army hellbent on finally shutting you down. You've come back from exile with your legend intact, your charisma at full burn, but your margins are razor thin. One misstep, one mistimed charge, and it's all over. And today, your bath is out of commission. You joke with your staff that this is a bad omen. A dirty emperor loses, you mutter, half serious. Baptiste laughs a little too nervously. He knows your rituals aren't about hygiene anymore. They're armor. Thin, sudsy armor. You sit in your chair, staring out at the marshy fields. The rainfall slows, just a bit. But the mud has done its damage. The cannons can't move. The men slip and curse. Every calculation you'd made the night before, while soaking in a shallow tin basin, is now useless. Historians still argue whether the delay caused by the rain truly cost you the battle. Some say yes, the ground was too soft for artillery. Others insist you'd already lost the strategic edge. But you blame the bath. Because here's the truth, you didn't soak this morning. You didn't get that moment of stillness, of clarity. And now, everything feels off. Midday. The field is chaos. Your stomach churns, not from fear, but from the unease of routine interrupted. You find yourself fantasizing about a long soak. About warm water and mint oil. You briefly consider asking for hot water, just for your hands, but there's no time. Instead, you pace. You snap orders. You watch your cavalry charge, and break. And somewhere in the madness, you wonder, is this what it feels like to lose without grace? There's a quirky detail not many know. During the retreat, one of your officers tries to retrieve your travel tub. It's already packed, sealed in a cart. But the wheels are stuck in the muck. The officer, in full uniform, nearly breaks his back trying to free it. The emperor's comfort must not be left behind, he declares. It gets left behind. That same officer is later captured by Prussians and interrogated. According to one fringe account, he refuses to talk, not out of loyalty, but embarrassment. They'll laugh when they learn what I was saving, he says. You escaped the field battered but alive. No bath. No plan. Just rain in your eyes and the slow, sinking realization that it's over. Back in Paris, things fall apart faster than your dignity in wet socks. The chamber turns cold toward you. Supporters flee. And even Baptiste, faithful till now, starts packing towels a little slower. You abdicate. Again. The British won't risk another comeback. They send you to St. Helena, a tiny, wind-blown speck of land in the South Atlantic. It's beautiful the way loneliness is beautiful, distant, untouchable, and steeped in melancholy. You arrive in 1815, not as an emperor, but as a supervised exile. And of course, you ask about the bath situation. The house they give you, Longwood, is damp, drafty, and smells faintly of mildew. The tub. Tin. Shallow. Mockery, really. The water is rarely warm, and the servants have to carry it bucket by bucket. You joke that you're being punished with subpar bathing. No one laughs. Still, you do what you've always done. You bathe. You keep the routine, even if it's a shadow of its former glory. Twice a day, if the weather allows. Once, if the winds howl too loud through the shutters. You improvise, boil herbs, create makeshift oils, mix your own soap pastes like a stranded apothecary. The routine is thinner, but it holds. One British officer tasked with monitoring you writes in a letter, the former emperor spends his mornings reading and his afternoons soaking. He speaks little, but appears contemplative. It is said he once spent 5 straight hours in the tub, doing nothing. You did. You were thinking about Josephine. About your son. About the Alps. About horses and honeyed pastries and the perfect water temperature. You were thinking about what it meant to be clean when the world thinks you're tarnished. Historians still argue whether your time on St. Helena broke you or merely dulled your fire. Some believe you never gave up hope of returning. Others say you knew, in your bones, that this was the last chapter. But even in exile, you found small victories. You convinced your caretakers to build a pipe system to draw water more efficiently. You designed a new towel rack. You taught a young servant how to steep eucalyptus the correct way. You weren't ruling an empire anymore, but you were still emperor of your bath. There's a peculiar local story, whispered by islanders years later, about how they once saw steam curling from your windows long after midnight. They claimed you spoke to the water. That you gave speeches to the ripples. They weren't wrong. Because in that tub, surrounded by cracked tiles and fading walls, you imagined everything differently. You won again. You rewrote the battles. You stood before cheering crowds. You outmaneuvered Wellington. You made peace with Josephine. You saw your son grow tall and proud. Water has memory, they say. And yours remembers everything. The days blend now. They bleed, like watercolors left too close to a rainstorm. You rise late, soak early, eat little, and write even less. The air on St. Helena is thick, salt-laced, heavy with wind. It whistles through the shutters, sighing like an old man who's seen too much. You're no longer Napoleon the Conqueror, not even Napoleon the Exile. You're just the man with the bath schedule. Your routine becomes so precise it would impress a Swiss watchmaker. The first bath, drawn before the sun peaks. The second, in the late afternoon, when the light hits the chipped tile at just the right golden angle. That hour, between 4 and 5, becomes your sanctuary. The water, now tepid at best, welcomes you like an old friend, no judgment, no expectations. One mainstream fact, during these years, you dictate your memoirs to loyal companions like General Bertrand and Emmanuel de Las Cases. They sit near your bath or wait just outside the door, quills in hand, catching your words like dripping water from a leaky ceiling. You want the world to remember your version of events, who you really were. Not the monster, not the tyrant. Just, misunderstood. You become meticulous with phrasing. Never lost a battle, you mutter once, chin resting on the rim of the tub. Bertrand looks up. But Waterloo, he begins. You lift one wrinkled finger. Never lost a bath, you say. He doesn't press it. There's a fringed tale passed down from one of the servants, a boy named Tom, maybe Tim, no one agrees. He claimed you once held a mock military trial for your sponge. It betrayed me, you supposedly announced. Collapsed mid-scrub. You even sentenced it to hanging, on a clothesline. Absurd. Probably fictional. But again, it sounds like you. The days are slow. The body aches. You begin to suffer from abdominal pain, sharp and persistent, like betrayal made flesh. The British doctors poke, prod, prescribe chalky elixirs. Nothing helps. And yet, you bathe. Even on the worst days, even when your skin feels too thin, like parchment soaked too long, you insist on being lowered into that lukewarm basin. It's no longer indulgence. It's ritual. A defiance. They can take your throne, your title, your continent, but they can't take your soak. Historians still argue whether your health deteriorated due to the island's climate, deliberate neglect, or simple genetic misfortune. Some speculate poisoning. Others blame stress, or untreated ulcers, or maybe just the erosion of a spirit that had nowhere left to march. But those debates don't reach you. You're too busy counting bubbles. One afternoon, you fall asleep in the water. Not a gentle nap, an hours-long slumber. The house grows quiet. The servants whisper. No one wants to wake you. When you finally stir, your fingers look like ancient figs, and you laugh softly to yourself. Time well spent, you murmur. Your room smells of steam, lavender, and damp linen. The shutters rattle. The clock ticks slowly, too slowly, as if even time has grown reluctant to keep pushing forward. At night, You dream in bath scenes. You're a boy again, swimming in the rocky Corsican coves. You're in Egypt, scrubbing desert from your shoulders. You're in Paris, in that too small clawfoot tub Josephine insisted looked imperial. Memory becomes soup. You drift in and out, real and imagined moments swirling together. One moment, you're dictating your vision for a united Europe, the next, you're arguing with Baptiste over soap placement. The wind never stops. It howls across the hills like ghosts reenacting cavalry charges. You ask once, half awake, if the wind remembers your name. The servant just shrugs. There's a quirky note in a diary from a British officer who visited you during these years. He wrote, "The general greeted me in a robe, soaked to the knees, and offered no apology. He seemed more water than man." Accurate. Because by now, the bath isn't something you do. It's who you are. A being half dissolved, suspended between memory and surrender. Your generals have faded. Your lovers, too. Your son writes less. Paris feels like a dream someone told you about secondhand. But the bath? The bath is real. Every ripple. Every groan of the metal tub. Every time the sponge sighs under your grip. You once told Los Cases, the bath is the only place where nothing demands conquest. He didn't write it down. Maybe he thought it wasn't important. But it was. One day, you ask for the curtains to be drawn all the way back. You want to see the horizon from the water. The sea stretches endlessly, gray and unknowable. You close your eyes, and for a second, it feels like Europe again. Unseen. Waiting. But when you open them, it's still St. Helena. The wind still howls. And you are still dying. The pain grows. You refuse to show it. You grip the edges of the tub, holding on to the routine like a soldier holds the last flag in a retreat. They beg you to rest more. To eat. To write your will. You just ask for hot water. There's an open scholarly debate about your mental state during these final months. Some insist you remain sharp, playing chess, dictating thoughts on Plato. Others describe a descent into bitterness and delusion. The truth, as always, likely floats somewhere in the middle, like a man dozing in warm water, half dreaming, half aware. And then, one morning, you whisper to Baptiste, "Today, no bath." He stops. Eyes wide. You've never said that before. Not once. "Just lie me down," you add. "The water is already inside me." He obeys. Quiet. Gentle. You sleep. Outside, the rain begins again. Soft. Persistent. The kind that seeps into stone and soil and memory. And the tub, still warm, waits. You doze longer these days. Even when you're not asleep, your mind floats in that dreamy half-space just above slumber, like a soap bubble that refuses to pop. Your body is giving up, no question about it. But your thoughts still wander. Mostly to water. You lie on the narrow bed, its mattress too firm, its corners always poking at your spine. The room smells faintly of lemon oil and damp cloth. You haven't bathed in 2 days. Maybe 3. You've lost track. Baptiste has stopped mentioning it out loud. There's just a quiet presence in the room, and a steaming bucket, as if the routine is still waiting, patient and unbothered. One mainstream fact, your official cause of death will be recorded as stomach cancer. The British Commission will note lesions, discolorations, and a great swelling. They'll sketch your autopsy in meticulous ink, complete with measurements and guesses and a few raised eyebrows. But others will whisper. The water was poisoned, they say. Arsenic laced into your wines, your tonics, maybe even your bath oils. Some believe it was the wallpaper, green and pretty, yes, but dyed with toxic pigments. Historians still argue whether the sickness came from within or was handed to you in teaspoons. Not that it matters now. Your strength wanes, like steam vanishing from the bath surface. What once was a necessity is now a luxury. Even the idea of being submerged seems distant, like a favorite song you can't quite hum. Still, in your moments of clarity, you ask about the tub. Has it been cleaned? You mumble one morning. Baptiste nods, dabbing your forehead. Good, you say. It deserves respect. There's a curious little tidbit tucked in one of the letters written by a housemaid at Longwood. She wrote that, once, she found you sitting beside the empty tub, fully clothed, your hands resting on the rim like you were comforting an old friend. He said it was his mirror, she wrote. That it showed him more than any looking glass. And in truth, it was your mirror. The bath never lied to you. The water didn't care whether you were emperor or exile, conqueror or captive. It just held you. Reflected you. Softened you, quietly. The wind presses harder now. It rattles every window like a reminder that the island has no secrets. Even the weather seems to know your time is almost up. You doze again and drift into dreams of splashing. Not the sea, but the old tub from Paris. The golden fixtures, the way the water echoed off the marble floor, the absurdly large sponge you once used to reenact naval battles. You laugh softly, the breath barely a whisper. The nurse thinks it's a sigh. You murmur Josephine's name. Then your son's. Then a string of battle dates, Austerlitz, Jena, Borodino. You get one wrong. Baptiste doesn't correct you. On the fourth day without a bath, you speak no words at all. The tub remains in the corner. Cold. Dry. Its surface slightly dented from years of travel and use. Someone covers it with a cloth, and you almost rise up to protest, but your body won't follow the thought. Historians still argue whether you died on May 5th at exactly 5:49 p.m. or slightly earlier. A few believe the official time was chosen for symmetry. Napoleon. May 5th. 5:49. Too poetic to be real, too perfect to be coincidence. But here's what really happens. The wind dies down. The candles flicker but don't gutter. You inhale, once, shallowly, and then exhale so slowly it's hard to tell when you stop. The room falls into a kind of respectful silence. Not heavy. Just, suspended. A servant steps forward. Checks your pulse. Steps back. And Baptiste, with trembling fingers, walks to the basin. He pours out the water that had been waiting. It steams faintly as it hits the ground, like the breath of a ghost finally released. There's a strange peace in the room. Even the tub seems to know. They clean your body the old way, with warm cloth and gentle soap. They comb your hair, straighten your robe, and finally, delicately, tilt the old tub on its side to move it out of the room. Someone jokes it deserves a pension. Later, a British officer, not a cruel one, just practical, offers to buy it. Baptiste refuses. It was his, he says. No one else's skin should touch it now. The tub is placed in storage. Forgotten for a while. And you? You're buried on the island, though not forever. In 1840, your remains are returned to France, a ceremonial victory decades after your defeat. The crowds weep. The horses wear black plumes. The cannons roar. One mainstream report claims your funeral procession was the longest Paris had ever seen. But no one mentions the bathtub. Still, it survives. Years later, a group of curious historians visits St. Helena. They're shown the room, the bed, the maps, the slippers. And yes, the tub. It sits under a cloth in a back room, not polished or displayed. Just, waiting. One of them, a writer with too much imagination and a flair for sentiment, leans in and says, "Imagine what this old thing has seen." No one answers, but everyone nods. Because they can imagine it. The silence. The steam. The sloshing. The whispered plans. The invisible crown, floating just above the bubbles. And in that moment, the tub becomes more than a tub again. It becomes history. Not the kind with dates and treaties and borders. But the quiet kind. The kind you feel in your bones. The kind you can smell, like lavender and iron. The kind that makes you pause. The kind you don't expect to remember until, one day, you do. So now you're gone, but your bathtub isn't. Funny how the things we cling to outlast us. The tub that once steamed with lavender and dignity now sits in silence, a warped metal husk waiting for someone to notice. It's not in a museum. Not yet. Not behind glass or velvet ropes. Just tucked away, quietly, like a folded letter no one has the heart to read. But someone always does. Years pass. Decades. The world moves on. Revolutions rise, borders blur, fashion gets weird. And still, your name echoes. Not always with respect, but always with interest. People just can't let you go. You're a walking contradiction, even now. A military genius who bathed like a sleepy poet. A feared ruler who made sponge jokes. A man with a bath so famous, it could arguably have its own autobiography. One mainstream historical fact, by the 20th century, Napoleon has become less of a man and more of a myth. Textbooks write you in bold, statues go up, then down, then back up again depending on who's in charge. There's even a dessert named after you. Okay, technically not you, but close enough. Mille-feuille. Layers. Flaky. Pretentious. Poetic, really. But back to the tub. Sometime in the early 1900s, it's rediscovered. A British officer stationed on St. Helena, bored out of his mind and perhaps a bit too sentimental for the military, comes across the old basin in storage. He writes in his diary, "The Emperor's tub, dented but oddly majestic." Like him, I suppose. The bathtub starts a slow migration. It's shown to visitors. It becomes a curiosity. Tourists take fuzzy photographs. Children touch it when they think no one's looking. Someone tries to buy it, of course. There's always someone. The fringe tidbit comes in here. An apocryphal story claims that a medium once tried to contact you through the bathtub. Yes, seriously. They filled it with water, lit candles around it, and dropped in a small wooden boat as a kind of spiritual vessel. They swore the water rippled without wind. That it smelled faintly of tobacco and citrus. And that, at one point, they heard you whisper, "Too cold." Was it true? Of course not. Probably. Maybe. Historians still argue whether you'd be amused by the spectacle or furious. Personally, I like to think you'd pretend to be insulted but secretly enjoy the attention. You always had a flair for the dramatic. And if nothing else, it's flattering that people are still this obsessed with how you bathed. In the years that follow, more objects from Longwood House make their way into museums. Your hat. Your writing desk. Your death mask. But the bathtub? It lingers in limbo. Too awkward to display, too important to throw away. Meanwhile, your legend grows legs. Films, novels, operas. Children reenact your battles using chairs as forts. Scholars dissect your strategies like recipes. And every few years, a new theory emerges. You weren't really short, your strategies were proto-modern, your fall was inevitable, your rise was improbable. One theory claims you were never truly exiled. That St. Helena was a front. That you escaped and lived anonymously in America, in a small house by the sea. That you sold soap. That you wrote anonymous newspaper articles about proper bathing techniques. Highly unlikely. But, not the worst retirement plan. The tub, now aged and delicate, is eventually shipped off the island. Crated, labeled, and moved through a bureaucratic fog of paperwork that somehow never mentions bubble routine. It ends up in France. Of course it does. Where else? It takes time, but eventually it finds its resting place in a quiet corner of a provincial museum, small, unassuming, not in Paris. The staff debates whether to polish it or leave it as is. Ultimately, they decide on authenticity. Good call. No one wants a shiny bathtub from a dusty emperor. And there it sits. A shallow basin. Dented. Lined with ghost water and invisible sighs. Visitors lean over it and whisper. Some imagine the steam curling around your shoulders. Some just wonder how you fit in it. Kids think it's weird. Adults pretend not to be impressed. But all of them look. Because this tub held more than water. It held worry, and exhaustion, and pride, and memory. It held you when nothing else could. A little boy asks his mother, "Why is this bathtub so important?" And she says, "Because he used it. All the time." The boy shrugs. "I use the bath all the time, too." "Maybe one day yours will be in a museum," she says, half smiling. "Hope not," he replies. Smart kid. A quirky story circulates among museum staff. They claim a custodian once found condensation on the tub after closing time, even though the building had no heating. They joke that your ghost still stops by now and then, just to check the temperature. They say that sometimes, on quiet nights, you can almost hear the faint splash of water from the corner of the exhibit. The custodians never verify this officially. Of course not. But they still glance over their shoulder when locking up. And as for you, well, you're eternal now. Embalmed in textbooks, enshrined in arguments, half remembered in movie scenes and war games. But beneath all the politics and power plays, beneath the crowns and treaties and marble monuments, there's something softer. Something quieter. A metal tub, a warm soak, a moment of peace. Maybe that's your real legacy. Not just battles and borders. But bubbles. You wouldn't believe what happens next. Well, maybe you would. After all, you're Napoleon, no stranger to having your name dragged through every salon, university, and late-night conspiracy circle. But still, even you might raise an eyebrow at this part. You become marketable. One mainstream historical fact: by the 21st century, Napoleon has become one of the most recognized figures in world history. More people know your silhouette than the names of their own country's presidents. You've become shorthand for ambition, intensity, and yes, occasional overcompensation. Your name gets attached to everything from complex syndromes to designer colognes. And yet, in the middle of all this brand building, something strange starts to happen. People fixate on the weirdest detail: your bath. Somewhere between the academic journals and novelty coffee mugs, a tiny trend begins to bubble, pun intended. Lifestyle blogs begin talking about Napoleonic bathing routines. There's a sudden surge in articles with titles like "Soak Like an Emperor" and "Why Napoleon Took 3 Baths a Day and You Should Too." It's hilarious. And kind of sweet. The fringe tidbit here. A celebrity wellness guru once claimed to have channeled Napoleon's bathing spirit, and launched a luxury bath salt line called Corsican Calm. Lavender and bergamot, $45 a jar. The label features a stylized sketch of your bathtub with steam shaped like a laurel crown. Of course, the irony is completely lost on the marketing team. Historians still argue whether you'd love or loathe this newfound fame. You once said, "A throne is only a bench covered in velvet." Would you say a bath is just a bucket with ambition? Hard to know. But the fascination grows. Social media starts playing its part. A viral TikTok trend shows influencers trying Napoleon's Bath Challenge, 30 minutes in steaming hot water while listening to classical music and dictating imaginary political manifestos. Most of them get too pruny at the 20-minute mark and abandon their empires of scented bubbles. Meanwhile, the museum housing your tub finally leans into the hype. They create a temporary exhibit titled "The Emperor at Ease." There's a life-sized replica of your bath. People can step into it, No water, of course, and pose with props, quill pens, tiny hats, dramatic frowns. The gift shop sells candles labeled Strategic Steam and Austerlitz Aftershave. It sounds ridiculous, and it is, but also, strangely comforting. The idea that even the most powerful figures in history had rituals, comforts, vulnerabilities. That someone who conquered most of Europe still needed time to soak and think and drift. A teacher brings her students to the exhibit. They shuffle past the placards and murmured commentary, more interested in their phones than your finer campaigns. But when they reach the bathtub, something changes. One student lingers. She leans close, reads the details, and then asks quietly, "Did he ever cry in here?" The guide hesitates, caught off guard. "There's no record," they finally reply, "but, probably." The student nods. "Same." And just like that, the past folds into the present. Not with fanfare, but with empathy. Your bathtub becomes less of a relic and more of a mirror again. A strange, curved mirror in which people see not just you, but themselves. Their stresses, their exhaustion, their fleeting moments of peace. There's an open scholarly debate about how much of your bath routine was indulgence versus strategy. Some say it was a psychological tactic, carving out control when the world spun too fast. Others argue it was simple human need. After all, a body constantly at war with itself, your stomach, your nerves, your insomnia, deserves a quiet sanctuary. A French novelist writes a fictionalized memoir of your final years, told entirely from the point of view of the bathtub. It's oddly poetic. The tub narrates your silences, your weight, your steam-draped monologues. The final chapter is just the sound of dripping water. It wins an award. Of course it does. There's talk of turning it into a stage play. The bathtub as both set and character. You as ghost, memory, echo. And all the while, people keep bathing. Not because you did, but because we all do. Because beneath everything, the uniforms, the gossip, the museums, we are bodies trying to calm down. One particularly rainy Tuesday, a maintenance worker in the museum pauses in front of the tub. It's quiet. The last tour ended hours ago. She stares at the dented rim, the thin spider crack in the porcelain finish, the slight unevenness where the base once shifted on volcanic rock. She says, not to anyone in particular, he probably had no idea this would be the thing people remembered. Then she turns out the lights. And for a moment, in the soft, echoing dark, it's as if the tub exhales. Now, as the world rolls forward with its noisy progress, electric scooters, streaming platforms, genetically personalized smoothies, your bathtub becomes an unlikely symbol of something very unmodern, slowness. That's right. You, the man who once charged across Europe at lightning speed, are now quietly promoting leisure. You, with your powdered temper and caffeinated ambition, are repackaged as the patron saint of mindful soaking. One mainstream historical fact: in modern France, Napoleon is still hotly debated. Statues of you stand tall in some places and are pulled down or quietly removed in others. There's tension between your legacy of reform, the Code Napoleon, education systems, centralized administration, and the bloodier side of empire building. You weren't exactly a chill guy. But in bathrooms across the world, you're being reimagined. People play lo-fi remixes of Beethoven's Eroica Symphony while slipping into clawfoot tubs, lighting candles, and trying to recreate what they now call the imperial unwind. Someone even starts a blog chronicling their year-long attempt to bathe like Bonaparte. They include playlists, lavender oil reviews, and reflections on power, loneliness, and prune hands. You'd be scandalized. Or maybe flattered. Possibly both. Here's your fringe tidbit: in Japan, a small spa hotel near Kyoto installs a Napoleon room. It features an enormous, vintage copper tub and offers guests a curated soak experience inspired by your ritual. The room includes a replica of your favorite cologne, slices of lemon, for imagined scurvy prevention, and a tiny hat on a towel rack. They even pipe in faint cannon sounds for historical ambience. Most guests opt to turn that feature off. Historians still argue whether all this mythologizing is doing more harm than good. On one hand, you're being reduced to a meme, a brand, a scented joke. On the other, at least it's keeping history alive in an oddly cozy way. You're being remembered, not just as a conqueror, but as a man who, despite everything, needed a good soap. Somewhere online, a debate breaks out over whether your famous lavender oil formula should be considered public domain. An artisanal soap maker insists that their product is based on your personal recipe found in an old inventory list. A historian argues the list referred to horse bomb. No one wins, but the soap sells out anyway. Meanwhile, in classrooms, kids start asking more questions about the human side of historical figures. What did they eat? Did they sleep well? Did they ever get bored? And yes, did they bathe? Teachers lean in. They begin using your routine as a case study in how history isn't just about war and policy, it's about people. Exhausted, complex, ridiculous people. One lesson plan includes a prompt: write a letter to Napoleon offering him modern bathtime advice. The responses are charming. One student writes, "Dear sir, try Epsom salts and maybe cut back on drama." Your bathtub, once just a utilitarian basin, has morphed into metaphor. It's being used in think pieces about self-care, in art exhibits about vulnerability, in poetry slams about the burdens of power. One spoken word performer ends her piece with the line, "Even emperors wrinkle when the water's too hot." And yet, for all the fluff, the bathtub keeps its dignity. It remains a physical object. Rusted, quiet, unchanged. Tourists still visit the museum. Some just for a selfie. Others stand in front of the tub in complete silence. A few leave small items at its base: lavender sprigs, notes folded into triangles, one rubber duck with a tiny crown. A janitor finds it, holds it up, laughs to himself, and sets it gently on a shelf behind the reception desk. Somewhere else entirely, across the world, an artist creates a sculpture called Last Soak. It features a stone figure slumped in a basin, surrounded by ghostly steam made of wispy glass. There's no label, no plaque, but people know. They always know. That's the funny thing about legacy. You can't control it. You can try, write memoirs, give grand speeches, wear great hats, but in the end, people remember what sticks. And apparently, what stuck was not just your genius or your exile, but your sponge. A pop-up museum in Berlin once includes an installation called Daily Rituals of Great Men. Your section is the most popular. People crowd around a replica of your bath set, fascinated not by your victories, but by the ritual of pouring warm water, the towels you chose, the little stool you sat on. One visitor whispers, "He was so real." And that's it, isn't it? You weren't just a figure in silhouette, riding into battle under a curling banner. You were a man who got tired. Who needed warmth. Who liked to be clean. The tub, in all its plain, metallic indifference, is proof of that. Years from now, maybe the replica will be all that remains. Maybe the original will crumble, or disappear in some tragic storage accident involving a clumsy forklift and a distracted intern. Who knows? But the image will survive. Not the coronation. Not the Waterloo pose. The bath. The steam. The scent of lavender, slowly drifting across volcanic stone. Eventually, as the centuries stack up like tired dominoes, even the bathtub itself starts to slip into legend. You'd laugh at how the story warps. One day it's brass, the next it's gold. In one retelling, it's filled not with water, but with champagne. Another insists you had it shipped from Egypt, carved from sacred granite, blessed by a priest who only spoke in riddles. None of it's true, probably, but that's never stopped anyone before. And that, of course, is the point. One mainstream historical fact: the further we drift from events, the more they become stories. And stories, by their very nature, swell and shimmer. Your real tub, modest, dented, and barely big enough for a man of average size, now swims through layers of exaggeration. In some versions, it heals. In others, it curses. One particularly enthusiastic tour guide in Prague refers to it as a vessel of clairvoyance. No one questions it. The crowd just nods, wide-eyed and drowsy with myth. Meanwhile, a team of graduate students begins a research project called Napoleon's Bathing Ritual and the Theater of Solitude. Their paper argues that the bath was more than hygiene, it was a stage. A performance of control. Of reflection. That you rehearsed power in that tub the way an actor studies his lines. You're alone, yes, but you're never off stage. Fringe Tidbit Time, a 2040 design exhibition includes a futuristic home spa inspired by your bathing philosophy. It's got AI-controlled water temperature, mood-based lighting that adjusts to your stress levels, and a setting called Elba Retreat. Press it, and you're bathed in melancholy strings and the scent of bitter oranges. The tub gently pulses like a heartbeat. It costs more than a car, but people line up to try it. Historians still argue whether it's fair to reinterpret historical routines through modern lenses. Some say yes, it humanizes the past, makes it relatable. Others push back, warning against turning you into a spa mascot. You, who once kept Europe's crowned heads awake at night. You, reduced to bath salts and playlist curation. But the thing is, legacy isn't a file you lock away. It's a river, people dip into it, cup out what they like, and leave the rest. A teacher tells her students, history is not just the story of big things. It's also small rituals. How people brushed their teeth. What they whispered to themselves when the world got heavy. She pauses. Or how they took a bath. A student raises her hand. So, Napoleon's bath isn't just about Napoleon? No, the teacher says. It's about all of us. What we do when we're tired, and alone, and maybe a little scared. A writer, one of those folks who eats granola out of a mason jar and types on a vintage typewriter, publishes a short story called Steam Portrait. It imagines your final bath as a conversation with the water itself. The water speaks in riddles. You argue with it. You apologize to it. You ask it, gently, do you think they'll remember me? The water doesn't answer. But we know the answer, don't we? We remember. Maybe not always accurately. Maybe not always respectfully. But we remember. And more importantly, we imagine. That's what the bath has become now. Not just an object, but an invitation. A place where people can fill in the blanks. Where they can see you not as a statue, but as someone blinking steam from their eyes, fidgeting with a sponge, mumbling about troop movements while water slowly cools. The tub shows up in pop art. In music videos. In poetry journals with names like Porcelain Empires and Steam and Silence. One sculpture installation fills a gallery with cast iron tubs, each one suspended mid-air and glowing softly from within. Visitors walk among them like pilgrims in a surreal church. A placard at the entrance reads, "Even emperors need to soak." Somewhere in a quiet flat, a retiree sketches the tub from memory. He saw it once on a trip, years ago. The museum was dusty. The guide was bored. But something about it stuck. He draws it now, not for accuracy, but for comfort. His version is simpler. No fancy legs, no gold trim. Just a basin. A shape. A place to sit and forget the world for a while. A podcaster, because of course there's a podcast, records an entire episode in her own bathtub, discussing you in hushed tones between splashes. She ends with a whisper, "I don't think Napoleon feared death as much as he feared silence." And perhaps, in that strange echoing space between warm water and cooler thought, that's where you still live. You're not marching anymore. You're soaking. Thinking. Drifting. Because sometimes the most revolutionary act isn't conquest. It's stillness. And though your empire fell, though your name has been twisted, worn, and wrung out like a damp towel in a storm, one thing remains unshaken, the image of a tired man in a tin tub, staring at nothing, letting the heat do what it could. Time rolls on, and the memory of you becomes a strange sort of lullaby. A soft chant repeated not for accuracy, but for comfort. People no longer recite your military maneuvers or quote your political reforms, not unless they're trying to pass a history exam or impress a very niche dinner party. But the bath? The bath lingers. Mainstream historical fact, over the past few decades, the public's interest in microhistory has surged, those tiny, specific moments that illuminate broader human truths. Napoleon's bathing routine has, oddly enough, become a favorite subject in that realm. Professors included in lectures titled The Private Lives of the Powerful, slotting it between Churchill's monogrammed towels and Queen Victoria's morning gloves. And so your bathtub becomes an artifact of shared humanity. A reminder that even the most mythic men were vulnerable. Tired. Sore. Maybe constipated. Let's be honest, your diet wasn't exactly plant-forward. A fringe tidbit. A sleepy French town installs a fountain shaped like your bath. Locals nickname it Le Bubbly Boney. At noon, jets of steam puff out the top and a recording of faint harp music plays for exactly 90 seconds. It's all funded by a local bakery, whose croissants are rumored to resemble your hat. Historians still argue whether such tributes cross the line into kitsch. Is this how we're meant to honor the past? With novelty fountains and bath bomb tie-ins? Or is that the most honest form of remembrance, humble, strange, and tinged with affection? Meanwhile, the tub itself, yes, the original, sits quietly in its museum, now encased in temperature-controlled glass. Security guards rotate shifts, but few visitors ever try to touch it. They stare. They take photos. One young man, clearly on the edge of sleep, rests his head against the viewing pane for just a moment, murmurs something like, "Must have been nice," and shuffles off to catch his bus. Across the world, the image of your bath has filtered into the architecture of memory. Some upscale hotels model their spa suites after Napoleonic rest aesthetics, which is just a fancy way of saying dim lighting, warm stone, and zero Wi-Fi. A mental health app includes a guided meditation called Bathe Like Bonaparte, complete with ambient cannon fire in the distance and affirmations such as, "You are more than your defeats." Let the lavender take the lead. You'd hate it. You'd love it. Hard to say. A novelist pens a dreamy, fictionalized account of your last week on St. Helena, all from the perspective of a tub who's learned to listen. It's surreal and slightly absurd. The tub grows fond of you. Worries for you. At one point, it tries to comfort you by warming itself with sheer will. Of course, it fails. But the gesture lingers. And perhaps the strangest thing of all is how children begin to learn about you not through war, but through wellness. You show up in bedtime stories. Illustrated books with titles like Napoleon's Naptime Soak and The Little General Who Loved Big Baths. There's one with pop-up steam clouds that puff when you open the page. A duck named Josephine floats by with encouraging quacks. History, scrubbed down for bedtime, becomes a gentle nudge toward empathy. The bathtub, once just a cold oval of metal, becomes an emotional artifact. A tiny monument to fatigue. A shrine to private ritual. And somewhere, deep down, people begin to understand that history isn't just made in battlefields or backrooms. It's made in bathtubs. In quiet spaces. In the echo of water lapping against porcelain, where power takes off its boots and vulnerability dares to speak. A traveling exhibit, half art installation, half museum, invites people to bring objects from their daily rituals and place them next to replicas of famous figures' personal items. Your bathtub sits next to Einstein's slippers. Frida Kahlo's eyebrow pencil. A chipped mug once used by Rosa Parks. The sign above reads, "What held them?" People leave notes. I come here when I feel overwhelmed. My father always said baths were where he did his best thinking. Thank you for reminding me it's okay to rest. And just like that, your bath stops being yours. It becomes ours. It becomes universal. A shared symbol of that aching moment between struggle and surrender. Between noise and stillness. So the next time someone mutters your name in a fit of ambition or mockery, or slaps your silhouette on a cologne ad or a bubble bath set, they're also, unknowingly, conjuring a quieter version of you. The one who just needed warmth. Stillness. Maybe a slice of lemon and a day without drama. And that version, that ghost of steam and bone, he lingers. Softly. In every room that hushes. In every bathtub that welcomes a weary soul. In every whispered thought that begins with, I just need a moment. So here we are. The water has cooled, the steam has settled into the curtains, and even the lavender oil has faded into that sweet, sleepy nothing. And still, you linger there, your elbows resting on the edge of the tub, fingers idly tracing patterns in the water like you're drawing battle lines on some invisible map. Except tonight, there's no war. No empire. Just heat. Just breath. Just the soft, hollow ring of solitude. One last mainstream historical fact: on May 5, 1821, you passed away on the rocky, wind-chilled island of St. Helena. Far from the marble halls of Paris, far from fanfare, wrapped in silence that even cannon fire couldn't puncture. The cause? Most likely stomach cancer. But even now, scholars bicker over the truth: arsenic poisoning, ulcers, divine karma, who knows? You died, yes. But slowly. Quietly. Perhaps even mid-thought. Maybe mid-soak. Fringe tidbit. According to a wildly unverified account, one of your final requests was for a warm bath. The attendants hesitated, unsure whether the water would help or harm. In the end, you never got it. But oh, how that would have been a full-circle moment, your life, beginning and ending in the hush of water. Historians still argue whether your legacy is a net gain or a net wound. Some frame you as a reformer, modern lawgiver, builder of institutions, a man ahead of his time. Others see only ruin, a power-hungry despot who left Europe in tatters. Both views miss something. They miss the bath. Because the bath, unlike your treaties or campaigns, asks nothing of us. It doesn't demand allegiance or spark outrage. It just sits. Waiting. Endlessly patient. A place to retreat into when the world makes too much noise. Now people visit that relic not for answers, but for stillness. They stand before it and imagine themselves inside it. Not as generals. Not as leaders. Just as humans. Achy. Alone. A little worn out from the day. And there's power in that image. You see, despite everything, your vaulting ambition, your exile, your headlines, you've become something entirely unexpected. You've become gentle. Not in reputation. Not in policy. But in legacy. Because what we remember most clearly is not the roar of your entrance, but the hush of your pause. The tub is where you were most human. Where your pulse didn't race for conquest, but for comfort. Where your silence was finally louder than your legend. And in that silence, something extraordinary happened: people began to listen. Not just to history, but to themselves. They saw your tired spine, your wrinkled hands, and thought, me too. Because for all our talk of greatness, what we really crave isn't power. It's peace. And no empire, not even yours, can compete with that. So now, as you lie there, yes, you, resting on your pillow with the fan humming softly in the corner and the last traces of light slipping beneath the curtain, just let it all fall away. Let the idea of empires soften into steam. Let the clatter of battles and parades melt into the quiet drip of a cooling faucet. You don't need to remember dates tonight. Or names. Or consequences. You followed the path from powdered wigs to porcelain tubs, and that's enough. Right now, there's just warmth. The warmth of water held in a basin. The warmth of a room made small by solitude. The warmth of knowing that even the world's loudest men needed somewhere to sigh. So let yourself sink a little deeper into the mattress. Let your limbs feel heavy. Let your thoughts drift the way steam does, upward, gently, without aim. Imagine your own version of that quiet room. Maybe it's stone-walled like St. Helena. Maybe it's modern, flickering with candlelight. Doesn't matter. What matters is that you're there. And everything else isn't. Even emperors sleep. Even conquerors close their eyes. And you? You're just someone who showed up tonight, gave your brain a rest, and let yourself be wrapped in a story about something oddly soothing, a bathtub, a man, and the pause between battles. So sleep now, dream easy, and if tomorrow feels too loud, well, you know what to do. Run the water. And let the silence begin again.